I just want to also ask about this wave of political violence in America and how this, I think this in a way has to do with what we're talking about because all
Yeah.
these people are sort of the omni cause. So I'm willing to put money that this guy that killed Charlie Kirk probably was supportive of Palestine. I'm willing to bet on it. If he was pro trans rights and he was pro and he had a trans boyfriend and he had all these ideas of him being hateful and therefore needing to stop him, I'm just willing to put it out there. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's usually I think this bet would be right, just as in a general sense. And then we see all these ICE facilities being bombed, and we saw the two Israeli embassy people being killed in
Yeah.
Washington D.C. And this other thing in New Hampshire last week, I think it was, when the guy screamed "Free Palestine" and shot into this place.
Yeah.
Um, and we see. And we obviously in the UK and all these other places also violence against anyone who is outwardly Jewish at this point.
Mm.
So how do you explain this? I think there's a willingness more than there was in the past to just use violence if you don't
Oh
like
yeah.
someone's opinion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's grown exponentially, and again, the polls will show this. And it skews disproportionately young. The younger somebody is, the more likely they are to believe that violence is an acceptable a resort to solve political disagreement. And that to say that that's unfortunate is to massively understate the situation. Again, it's something you just have to get through. People point to things like the killer of the United Healthcare executive in New
Yes.
York, gunned down. A father and a husband was gunned down on Sixth Avenue in New York by this young, reprehensible guy, and people said things like, well, I mean, this is Elizabeth Warren, a US senator, said you can only push people so far, as if, you have critiques of the American healthcare system, easy to do, just like it's easy to have critiques of the NHS in the UK. You have critiques of the healthcare system, and some logical endpoint of that is that you shoot a healthcare executive in the streets of Manhattan. Now, so I mention this because the violence that we've seen in recent days and weeks, particularly the assassination of Charlie Kirk, is another extension of what seems to again be a very unfortunate thing that parts of Western society have decided, which is that you have to take things into your own hands, and I think that has happened because otherwise responsible politicians have. It's happened in part. Obviously, the responsibility is always on the individual,
Yes.
but it has also come about because there has been a ramping up of the rhetoric, and specifically on the political left. I have to say, all political sides can be responsible for this and do have their own nutters and crazies and so on. But at the moment, unfortunately, a part of the radical left has pushed this idea that their opponents are not simply wrong, but that they're evil,
Yeah.
and that they knowingly and willingly do evil, and that the Jewish state is knowingly evil and practicing evil, and that ICE in America is Nazis, and that MAGA are fascists. And unfortunately, if you keep pushing that, you will get people, particularly young men, who will think that they can become a world historic figure by doing that thing of going back in time and killing Hitler.
Yes.
And unfortunately, if you keep calling people Hitler who are not Hitler,
Yes.
there will be people who will step up and shoot and kill.
Right.
And that's what we've seen. And it's absolutely a terrible thing to happen in a civilized democracy.
But how do you explain that according to a few polls I've seen, most Democrats think that it's a right winger that actually shot Charlie Kirk?
Well, that's because, as I've often said, having different opinions is very 20th century. In the 21st century, we have different facts.
Yes.
Um, and, you know, prominent figures, Jimmy Kimmel being the rather obvious one in recent days, told their listeners that because the accused shooter, killer, murderer was from a Republican family, that this one's on Republicans. That's flat out false and misinformation, fake news, and whatever you want to call it. But that means that a significant portion of America has a different set of facts about what should be able to be agreed upon to be just a terrible act of violence, which has to be condemned, and then understood for what this reprehensible young man might have been marinating in ideologically. But if you don't want to do that, then you're lost, completely lost, and you can't solve any problems. Yeah.
Douglas, I want to ask about the other side. So we've seen, I think I've started really noticing that it's really a real thing when you went on Joe Rogan and debated, I don't know, how do you call it, with Dave Smith, who I never heard of before. You spoke with him on Joe Rogan. And the point that I took away from everything was that there's a segment of what's, I guess you can call, like, broadly speaking, the American right that really hates Jews. And it's not Israel, because maybe for Dave Smith it is, I don't know him personally, but it's when his stuff goes online and you just scroll through the comments on X, for example,
Mm.
there's a significant, at least online, faction of people who really hate Jews. And whether the people who are putting out this stuff against Israel are, and or saying we're anti-Zionist, not anti-Semitic, and then but the way it's being interpreted by everyone who reads their stuff, their own followers, is total Jew hatred. So, and just the last example
Yeah.
was Tucker's thing with the hummus eaters who killed Jesus. And
Mm.
when he said that, I saw he sent a message to one of the people on one of the websites, and he said, "I never thought that this was even had anything to do with Jews, but it was interpreted by everyone following it that it was Jews." How do you just look at, broadly speaking, this phenomenon? It's not new, but I didn't. Growing up in the U.S., I never thought this was so prevalent. And growing up as
Well,
a Hasidic Jew in New York,
I'm afraid that the rats are out of the sewer again.
yes,
To steal from Camus' The Plague, the rats are out of the sewer again, and that's why a formerly reasonable person like Tucker Carlson, in the aftermath of his friend's murder, starts claiming that the Jews did it,
yes.
that Israel has questions to answer. I'm like, this is sick, sick stuff. I mean, that is what a dishonor to a friend to do that. It's just so, so disappointing. But I'm afraid, yes, the rats are out of the sewer again, metaphorically speaking. And I think it's probably happened. It's a generational swing. And I think there is one, if I can say so, rather obvious explanation. I was speaking the other week in Montreal and met beforehand lovely man who came to introduce himself, 95-year-old Holocaust survivor called Maxwell Smart, and gave me a book that he wrote, a memoir. It's called The Boy in the Woods, and he hid in the woods in Ukraine throughout the war, and it was very moving talking with him. Very more moving as well to read his book afterwards, and but I did just think then again, yes, it's back because the generation of survivors is very close to dying out. And I think that since 1945, there was such a clear line held on anti-Semitism, on Jew hatred, and indeed on Holocaust denial and more, which was basically just that the very simple one is that the survivors were there. They were around. Anyone David Irving like figure would come against the reality of people who were still alive and around. I think as that generation has died out, or is dying out, it's come back because they are not ashamed of it now.
Yeah.
And they don't, and I mean, I devoted part of On Democracies and Death Cults to the question of anti-Semitism, which, as you know, I mean, I think of as a perennially interesting, perennial problem. And my explanation, which as you know, I go into in the book, and I think I try to answer using Vasily Grossman as my guide is that anti-Semites always tell us about themselves and nothing about the Jews. And whatever it is somebody accuses the Jews of is something that they are guilty of themselves. And this is true 100% of the time. Grossman, in his own era, of course, gives the example of Nazi anti-Semitism, where the Nazis accused the Jews of being racists who wanted to take over the world. Almost as though it's projection,
Yes,
isn't it?
almost.
And in our day, people are accusing the Jewish state, the Jewish people, of things that they themselves are guilty of.
Yeah.
And this has to be countered, but it must always be countered fully, and with the knowledge that you might fail, that you'll certainly fail to ever put it underground forever. But my view, my whole life has been that the problem of anti-Semitism is, of course, it's first of all a problem for the Jews, but it's the sign that your society is going wrong.
Yes.
But when people start doing that, when they start looking for the omni cause and it's the Jews, everything else is going to go rotten.
Yes.
And that's why you see, when even a political side, the right, even people who were friends with Charlie Kirk, end up trying to suggest the Jews killed Charlie Kirk, everything else in their minds and in their worldview is going to be rotten as hell too.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe that Jews and non-Jews like me have a duty, an impulse to fight back against that, because otherwise everything is lost.